Hey now, and welcome to episode 53 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. But if this is your first time listening to us, well then welcome. I'm your host, Ruben, and as always, my co-host Stan is on the line. How you doing, dude?
Doing good, man. Yourself?
Awesome. So, this episode was with Arceris, and I thought it was pretty awesome. I don't, it was one of those ones where you didn't get to say much, but I thought it flowed really good, and it was a really good episode.
No, yeah, I just let it go, man. I didn't have anything else to add. It was perfect in the way that it was, and just kind of getting to know him, and then getting to know the business he's in and has a passion for. It was just all around great.
Yeah. So, and he reached out because he was inspired by our way earlier episode about ketamine therapy, and he had an experience with that, and so he came on to talk about that and other things. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. It was a really good episode, and bring Arceris. Yeah, so thanks, Arceris, for reaching out. I know you're a new member on the Discord, and we've had a few discussions here and there. But you reached out and told me a little bit about yourself, and it sounded really interesting. So thanks for coming on to talk with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've been listening to the podcast for a while, and I got kind of bored in the last, 5 weeks, and went through the back catalog and discovered the podcast you did on ketamine. And I actually had a similar but somewhat different experience with it, and it's both positive experiences. And figured that you might want to hear about that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive right into that. So you said that you had ketamine therapy, but had not had any other real drug experience before that, right?
Yeah, I guess it might be worth it if I gave a little bit of background on my life and how I led up to be needing the ketamine therapy. But basically, I was a pretty straight edge kid. I didn't even get drunk that much. I did alcohol and never smoked anything. Tried pot once, had a horrible experience with it. Never did that again. Mostly because I ate it and probably overdosed. But I went to law school. My wife and I, after law school, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. So my wife and I ended up starting a business together. We were doing extremely well until about 3 years ago or so. Then we got into some serious financial trouble when one of our partners totally screwed us. And my job in the business, being the lawyer, was the corporate counsel, and also I did bookkeeping. So I kept the thing alive, and all the angry people who hadn't gotten paid and all that, they're all calling me, and I somehow had to keep them happy, as well as pay our, at the time, I think it was 85 employees, and that 2 years of that took its toll, and I became pretty severely depressed. I think I was suicidal. In fact, at the time, I would have said yes, I was suicidal. I was to the point of starting to think about how to do it. And fortunately, my wife, her uncle, he was in the Iraq One, and had a horrible, his entire company or platoon, or I don't know, whatever, how big, but basically everybody died except him. He comes home, gets a job in the sheriff's department doing child sex crimes. This guy is majorly screwed up. We tried to get him help, tried to get him into all these therapies, and my wife was doing all this research and came up with the ketamine stuff, as well as how, at least in Europe, they're starting to use psilocybin and LSD and MDMA for serious soldier grade PTSD. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get him into one of these programs in time. He's still alive, but he severely injured himself with drugs. So when it came time for me to need these things, we already had the background, and while everything pointed to psilocybin, LSD, and MDMA being a better choice because of the law degree, because of all that stuff, I was very nervous about doing something that wasn't, sanctioned by the powers that be.
Yeah.
So I started looking at ketamine therapies. As an aside, I should say, I had tried all of the. It's not all of these. I had tried one or two antidepressants and had very, very bad experiences with them. So I basically wouldn't refuse to do any other antidepressants. Normally, the ketamine therapy requires you to have, gone through the process of trying 3 or 4 even, mainline antidepressants and having them all fail. But I wasn't going to do that. Like that would have taken years. The side effects are horrible on some of these drugs, and so I started looking around at ketamine clinics, and there's a couple in our area. The first one said, "No, we're not going to even talk to you because you haven't, been on these other meds." And the second one said, I'm not sure if I'm willing to give you the treatment, but come on down here. We'll have a consultation. We'll see. So I go down there. I tell him everything. My wife's in the room. We're talking about everything. He's like, "You know what? It sounds like you'd benefit from this." So he signed us up, and the next day I went in for the first infusion, and I don't know the last person you had on if he had this kind of cocktail, but the cocktail they gave me was obviously ketamine, but it was ketamine and Versed. So there was no anxiety, and if you have somebody who has very limited experience with drugs, they're worried about it causing some anxiety. So he put the Versed in there to prevent that. Even then, I don't think it was necessary. I knew by the time the drug wore off the first day, which was it was like an hour, that it was going to work. And that right there tells me that the medical establishment, if this ketamine therapy or something similar like psilocybin and whatever isn't the first line antidepressant therapy in a couple of years, there's a serious problem with ethics in that field, because all these other drugs, they take 6 months before you can know if they're working or not. This is an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 6 treatments in 2 weeks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 weeks, and it was like night and day. This was shortly after. This was my first child was about 1 at the time, and he was always very nervous around me. And after the ketamine treatment, it was night and day. He was like all lovey-dovey, wanted to cuddle with daddy. It was, I didn't realize how much he had read my emotions and he was standoffish because I was an asshole because I hated myself, and that all went away in the flash of a little bit of a medical procedure, and it saved my life. It was amazing. I had to go in for a touch-up about 6 or 7 months later, but now, March 17th, I had to lay off 150 people, and we have a hospitality business, and it's probably not going to reopen. And if I hadn't had this therapy, I don't know how I would be handling what's going on right now. But
yeah,
I can look at it now and see, like, you know what? This is the universe's way of saying you should stop.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean that's what's amazing about it is you don't feel like, oh my God, I got to go back to the therapy to where, I mean, and you said there about the ethics of the medical, the pharmaceutical industry and the people prescribing them, is that they want to put you on pills that you have to be on for the rest of your life, and that don't really handle a problem. They just kind of dull everything,
Yeah.
and they don't make you face it. They don't make you fix the problem, to where if this situation happened, if you had been on, Prozac or whatever for all these years, and then this situation happened, those drugs couldn't handle that spike,
Nope.
and that's where people either go off of them or take too much or try to, self-medicate with other things. And that's why we have such a problem with, people that maybe maintain but can't handle the peaks and valleys of life because of these. And I do think that does come down to ethics in the pharmaceutical company, because they are interested in producing drugs and developing drugs and treatment protocols that create customers, and not treating the disease. And that's what it seems to me like. I've self-medicated with psychedelics for the same reasons people are seeking out therapy and stuff. But yeah, it's it can be a one-time thing,
Yeah.
or one period of several treatments, and you're cured. And let alone the legality surrounding all this. They don't That's a disruption of their profit model,
Yeah.
and so that we as far as like the psychedelic revolution and people pushing to change policy, that's something we're fighting against too. Is not just the morality surrounding drugs and drug policy, but it's the profit. The way they have set up the industry. We're fighting against that almost more than the morality. If you look at the the polls of like um, uh, the general public and what they think about cannabis and psilocybin, people aren't like, oh, these are demon drugs. That's not the culture, at least in America. It's really the pushback from cutting into the profits of the pharmaceutical companies.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I can tell you that. So, of course, ketamine therapy is still not something that's generally covered by people's insurances.
Yeah.
But even Prozac is covered by insurance, and I don't know how much that costs a month if you're taking it for based on copay and all that. But the ketamine therapy was a total of $2,000 that I paid out of pocket for 2 weeks, and that's it. I think I had to pay another $300 for the two touch-ups, or for the each one 150 for each touch-up, and that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a lump sum more expensive, but I'm not paying now, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't mind going into like, what was the experience like what
Yeah.
the actual drug experience of it?
Okay, so not having any obvious thing to tack it onto or compare to, um, basically it was like, so I knew from reading ahead of time that psychedelics in general and ketamine, having good music playing is always it seems like it's a good thing. So
Oh yeah.
I picked for me I picked Bach or organ music just because I find that soothing. So I have that playing, and because it's an IV drip, it doesn't start off like a rocket. It sort of fades in. But after about 5 minutes or so, I closed my eyes, the world melted away, and all I see are these, large blocks of granite that are sort of gray and green and purple floating above me. That was the experience every time, and they would sort of move with the music and flow around me, and it was just an eerie experience, and nothing like the way people describe, say, ayahuasca or even strong LSD trips where you're being taught something. There was none of that. This was purely geometric shapes and floating things, and then just a feeling of everything's going to be fine, and that was it. It was. I think that it in this case, ketamine is doing its work kind of behind the scenes with the unconscious, not consciously. Whereas some of the other things kind of smack you across the face. At least that's my interpretation. Since the ketamine, I've only ever done microdoses of mushrooms and LSD. Haven't gone further than that, mostly for lack of time, really. But that's what I would describe it as. And every time it was basically the same. Although as it went on, the visuals became less intense than the auditory. The feelings that I was getting from the music became more intense. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've done ketamine, but I've not through an injection. Like I've snorted it, and like you said, it's not visionary. Visionary in the sense of like getting a message from the spirits and stuff like that. I think it's classified as a dissociative, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So at least what I can interpret that with my, somewhat above average drug knowledge, is that because it's not kicking in like serotonin and it's not a tryptamine. It's basically the fast track to what people like really try to do with meditation and stuff like that, of really like disconnecting from their body. And existing, it's not an ego death, with tryptamines and all that. Like everyone talks about the ego death where, you lose the sense of I, to where what I've experienced, and, they call a K-hole and stuff like that with recreational use of ketamine, is a different state of awareness and consciousness that is like still very much I, but it's like your body's gone and just on autopilot. Like you're breathing, you're not even thinking about breathing. You're not thinking about moving and stuff like that. Is that what you experienced?
Oh yeah. It was like, yes, it was very much, I did not feel like I lost my sense of person, like an ego, but I did feel like, I had completely departed my body, and there was no body anymore. And so I was almost like a pinpoint of consciousness floating through space.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was definitely an enjoyable experience. But as I said earlier, I've only done it 8 times because and in the medical setting, I don't really feel a compulsion or a draw or to like go out and do it again. And if I need it, I will. But there's no like nothing like an addiction or anything like that, or drug seeking. So yeah.
Well, and that's when I was taking ketamine, it was just a party thing, and I know I had pure stuff because I actually had a hookup of a guy that worked at a farm or a vet and was stealing vials of it, and we were actually cooking down the liquid. So I know it wasn't like cut with other things, which, looking back, like now, if I was someone trying to look for ketamine, like I don't think I would trust, powders and stuff, because who knows, with fentanyl going around and stuff like that. Okay. But I think that was it, is like I was looking for something a little more, and it was just this like serene kind of nothingness almost, like you said, like a pinpoint of consciousness floating around. But thinking back to that now and how it's being used for therapy, it's almost like well, like I said, it's what people are trying to reach with meditation, of just being, just no thoughts, no, just being. And that can be so good for our depression and anxiety, because it just, all of that stuff is almost a condition of our body. And that when we can extract our consciousness from our body with dissociatives, that all of that anxiety and depression just gets left behind, and that, like, because I use when I use LSD or mushrooms, I use nitrous oxide, which is a dissociative. And one of the reasons I use it, not only does it amplify the experience, but it just it just leaves the anxiety that I'm feeling of like a trip come up behind. And
Right.
and so like I could totally see that, you know, if you're severely, you know, treatment resistant depressed, that for your therapist to be like, well, you should meditate, like that's pretty hard. You're past that point, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know. And so it's like you do need an intervention of like, okay, now we need to really just shoot this stuff in your veins that's going to make you your consciousness leave your body. Like, do you think that's kind of why
Oh
it
yeah.
works as a depressant or
Uh,
antidepressant?
I think that I mean a theory that I've had is that um, since it's not actually trying to teach you something the way other things do, really what it's doing is a lot of depression is thought loops where you can't break your mind out of thinking about horrible things and it just kind of cycles over and over and over again. The ketamine broke all of those. Like that just for 1 hour there was none of that,
Mm-hmm.
and all I could do was effectively observe the things going on around me in my head. But there was no fear, there was no anxiety, there was no constant mulling over all the day's problems. And this all just stopped. And so when the drug wore off and consciousness fully returned, um, it was like, why would I start thinking about that again?
Yeah.
And that's why I knew it was going to work so quickly because, you know, the entire drive home, that my wife had to drive me home. It was there was no even hint of thinking about those things, and I mean, I started. I had tried to start meditating before that, you know, as a self help. I'd gotten the Sam Harris app and all that, and I never could get it to stick. And when I was doing the therapy, I was able to get it to stick and keep meditating pretty much daily. With all the stuff going around right now, I've kind of lost track of that and need to get back into it. But it kind of kickstarted me into being able to. Now I know I can meditate and I
Yeah.
can do it. Unlike before, where I felt like I couldn't do it. Maybe my brain is wired wrong or something.
Yeah.
But and I've had ADD and ADHD since I mean I was diagnosed back in the '80s when it wasn't even a serious like it was a serious diagnosis and you had to go through batteries of tests. So I always thought that well maybe ADD people can't do this, and the ketamine kind of showed me that no you're wrong, you can do it.
Yeah. 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 No, it's really uh, because I talk about it so much in our podcast. It's like I got to a point where I'm like, I need to practice what I preach and really, you know, stick to it. And it's like it's one of the hardest things to get into, but then one of the easiest things to like continue doing, you know, because you start to crave like that moment of your day of letting everything go. And but I understand. Um, it's hard to, you know, like my brother and sister are having a really hard time with the quarantine lockdown stuff, and like I just keep telling them that, and they're just shrugging it off like shut up, you know. And it's like I get it. It's hard to like be like, oh, this is gonna work. This is I get, and it's even harder even if they wanted to do it to actually get into it. But it's one of those things like you need a moment of your day to shut your brain down, you know, and the further along you get away from being able to do that, the harder it's going to be, and the more likely you're going to need, you know, a drug intervention, not intervention, but you know, drug treatment like that. So, yeah, I think it's great. Now, was there any sort of I don't know, like integration or like talk therapy with the therapist afterwards, or it's mainly just a drug clinic?
No, this was just a. I mean, there was a little bit after all the treatments were done, not after each treatment, but it was you know maybe a couple of hours of talk therapy beforehand, then the where it was you know 50% him describing how this you know the protocol and how everything was going to play out, and 50% some here's some things you might want to think about and try this and try that. He was actually the one that ended up really kind of saying you should bring some music. But and and not much afterward either. I still see him once every, say, 3 or 4 months, where we talk through some things, but fairly perfunctory at this point, because I think I think that what I had was caused by a nice obvious problem in my life. It wasn't like a depression that's always been with me and you couldn't shake it, or where you can't really pinpoint what happened. I know exactly what caused it, and so this helped me through the worst parts of it, and got me to the point where now I know I can get out to the other side of it. And once I get to the other side of it, I'm not worried about it not coming back. So it may be a little different than some other people, but it's also not like a PTSD either. So, yeah.
And I think that's where, and that's where I don't want to like always shit on the standard antidepressant route, because there obviously is depression and anxiety that is caused by a chemical imbalance that does need to be treated chemically. But I think that's where we run into the problem, is that psychiatry doesn't take that into account, I feel like. And it's just like they give this blanket drug to everybody, and it's like you're treating a chemical imbalance sometimes, or a lot of times, in people that don't have that chemical imbalance, that their depression is situational, like you said, and that's where these psychedelics need to be, psychedelics and dissociatives need to be taken seriously as a tool of psychiatry, and not even an alternative, just one of the tools in their tool chest. And much like you mentioned about PTSD, PTSD is not even a chemical imbalance. It's, a faulty, and this is just my assumption, I'm not using any science here, but a faulty like rewiring of the brain because of a traumatic experience. And so I kind of feel like my assumption of talking to people that have had different therapies is that the tryptamine based therapies with psilocybin and MDMA and well, that's not a tryptamine, I don't think, but whatever, the other things, they can actually, they have neurogenesis involved. They can actually rewire pathways, and like it's almost like those need to be used for depression and PTSD, and that maybe ketamine would only work temporarily, but not permanently for them.
And I think that you hit on something interesting there. It's the what is called treatment-resistant depression and and treatment-resistant PTSD is probably not a chemical imbalance, which is why it's treatment-resistant, because you're just treating a chemical imbalance. It's a wiring or a thought process imbalance, and those drugs, while they might dull the symptoms, aren't solving the problem. Whereas if you have somebody with a true chemical imbalance, those drugs are probably awesome. And and those are the people that they studied them in, and they worked. But the things like PTSD are, if you have something like that, your brain has rewired because of a extremely traumatic situation that it's trying to save your life for next time. So it doesn't. It's to some extent you could call it almost an adaptive response. So you're not going to fight that with a chemical balance.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's one of the worst things, one of the darkest things in our country's history, when they scheduled these drugs against the wishes of the psychiatry industry, well, not industry, field. But I mean, when MDMA was scheduled in the 80s, you had people going to the Hill and testifying, saying, "No, we need this drug. This is so helpful for us."
Yeah. Well, and in that instance, the reason MDMA became illegal was because of the impure form of it, of ecstasy, that was being, distributed in nightclubs by shady people, and people were having bad reactions to that. They were dancing, they were dehydrated, and some people had some bad experiences from that, and that became attributed to the molecule MDMA was the problem. And my uncle is he's retired, but he's a clinical psychiatrist, and he was saying it was like one of the most heartbreaking moments in the field of psychiatry was that, because they're like, no, it's the impurity of the street drug that is making this bad, and you can't take this tool away from us, because this is like, the philosopher's stone of psychiatry almost.
Yeah, and it was also very, yeah. It doesn't make logical sense. It was the DEA overreaching and trying to press their authority when you look at it, the fact that cocaine is not a Schedule One.
Yeah.
Heroin wasn't, and it's still. I don't believe heroin is in England a top schedule. I think they still prescribe it over there, but cocaine isn't, because it is the most effective anesthetic for, oddly, rhinoplasty.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's routinely used when you're getting a nose job. Yeah, shocker.
Yeah.
But it's that they basically completely ignored their own precedent. They completely ignored because the public outcry was too much, and of course when the public is outcrying, they don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's. Okay,
you said that that first day you realized it was going to be gone, right? Your conditions were going to be gone. What were the signs, would you say, that led you to that?
Well, I no longer had an urge to kill myself. I mean, that was gone immediately. It took the rest of the treatments to sort of alleviate the I guess what I would call the remaining of depression. But the very first treatment is the one that saved my life, because if I hadn't had that, I mean, I probably would have not done anything for several months, but I was definitely on that path. To the point that I mean, for me, the choice of suicide was a rational one, because I said we had I'll get into the technicalities a little bit, but my wife and I had fairly sizable insurance policies, life insurance policies. Obviously, you can't off yourself early in a life insurance policy, but there's this law, and every state has one. There's the particular number of years is different, but after a certain point, the insurance company must pay out for suicide, because it's no longer considered you got this insurance to kill yourself. No, this is actually a mental illness, and that's what killed you. Okay, so we had these insurance policies for long enough that we were way past that. And I said, you know what? If I kill myself, my family will have all this money, and all of our problems will be all their problems will be solved. So that's where I was. That's where I was headed. And the ketamine basically allowed me to see that no, I have this amazing little boy, and not only will he not be okay without a dad, but you really don't want to miss what's coming. So it didn't say that to me. It let me say that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement right there. That's one of the biggest things of, like, for as much as there is talk and everything with psychedelics and DMT of visiting other realms and all these things, that you can go down that rabbit hole with psychedelics. I think, and one of the biggest messages, I try to preach with my videos, and we try to preach with the podcast and stuff like that, is that, like, that's all cool to explore. I don't want to, like, say, that's not true. You're not visiting these other realms. But for the majority of people that will use a psychedelic drug, it's the messages and the visions are from within. It's taking the veil of, like, our ego, but also, like, our societal ego of what we think we're supposed to be doing, and what we're supposed, all the stuff we think we're supposed to be doing, and it lets our heart tell us what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be feeling, and that's the biggest thing, is that so many people are detached from letting their heart tell them, how to get through this. Like, life is a trip, man. And it's like, if you let an outside force tell you how to think, feel, and live, like, it's going to cause depression and anxiety. And to have a moment to let yourself tell you, the message, like, that's so powerful and so important for people to experience at least once, And that's the thing is like, I don't know how much you've read of like Terrence McKenna, um, uh, at all, but he has a quote of like, to live and die without having a psychedelic experience is like living and dying without having a sexual experience. And like, that's the reason I feel that is like, you didn't listen to your inside.
Mm-hmm.
If you have not experienced this once, you do not understand how powerful the universe within is.
Yeah. So prior to this experience, like I said, I hadn't done anything stronger than alcohol, but I had always been curious, but not brave enough to do anything about it. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, I've been microdosing mushrooms and LSD. I haven't done a full-on trip, but I fully expect that I will at some point in the future. But I want to do it right. I've read. I haven't read Terrence McKenna much, but I have read Michael Pollan, and I have read several of the other sort of important works in the field. And that I want to make sure that I get the setting right and have everything done properly, so that I can get the most out of the experience in a teaching and spiritual way. I don't really think I'm going to have any interest in doing it as for fun, but and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come on and talk about my experience. And I'm open about it with everybody that asks about it. It's someone like me who really didn't have a previous understanding of anything. I mean, I'm almost talking with the zeal of the converted. This is like, no, guys, this is really the shit. You need to do this if you're having these symptoms. You need to go talk to somebody. You need to do this stuff works, and it works fast, and it works well. And the fact that ketamine is the only one that's legal, that's what I tell everybody to do who's asked. And I just hope that the other things get opened up soon.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I appreciate you telling your story, because honestly, you're one of the voices like yours that came to it without the experience prior, are some of the most powerful in the movement to change the policy and change the direction of therapy here. That's like, we can have people on, we can have mushroom heads talking to mushroom heads all day long, and that's really not going to change anyone's opinion, but yeah, like hearing a very clear and concise message from someone who had, no other option but to try this, and it worked. Like, that is so powerful, and I really, I hope more and more people hear your story, just to get that out there. So
yeah. They just gotta look around and see if these clinics are in their area. If they're not, I can tell you that there's generally a concentration of them near military bases for obvious reasons, because it works, and it works on the kinds of issues that the military has. So if you can't find one, and if you find one and they don't want to talk to you because you haven't sort of gone through the ringer with all the pharmaceuticals, find another one. There's good doctors out there, and there's great doctors out there, and you can find a great doctor if you look hard enough.
Yeah. Now, I forgot when we had our last, when we talked to, I forgot his name, but the other ketamine therapy episode we had, Stan, I forgot. Have you experienced ketamine before?
I have not, no.
Yeah. I mean, for the sake of therapy, like I'll lump it in with psychedelics, but it is a completely different, for like you were saying, that you want to eventually take a larger dose of mushrooms or LSD. It is different in that, and especially for therapy, like, it requires integration afterwards, because it's a different experience of like, whoa, what the fuck was that, kind of thing. And so, like, you could, say you had the same experience and you were driving home with your wife afterwards, you may be able in that moment to be like, I saw this dragon, I saw this thing, I saw this and that, and then, like, as those memories kind of fade away like a dream, you're left with like well, what the hell did that fucking mean? And whatever, you might have an overwhelming feeling of like the depression being gone, but to make sense of it all, like it does require like follow-up integration and talk therapy and stuff like that. But like you said, that the ketamine uh, centers are usually around military bases. I don't know. You said you listened to our back catalog a little. A couple episodes ago, we talked to two different uh, ex-military that are now doing a 501c3 to where they uh, provide like a fellowship to provide an ayahuasca ceremony to veterans with PTSD, and it's kind of like that's what they need. Like they need to break down that programming of not only whatever traumatic experiences they went through, but also just the programming that the military provides almost. Um, and ayahuasca, which I have not done, seems to just kind of break you down to your core, show you everything, and just kind of rewire that programming to where I don't think the ketamine is capable of that. Like it's just like I said, they're two different tools to treat two different situations.
Ketamine is very gentle. I mean, at least that was my experience with it. It was very gentle. There was no stress, no fear, not even an inkling of that there could be a bad trip or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It was just very. It was gentle. It maybe like. See, you're right. It is not a psychedelic, and it's not even related to the compounds, but it does have effect on some of the same neurotransmitters through a different mechanism. They don't really understand how it works, but it does seem like it's training wheels on psychedelics to some extent through in the way I had it.
That's a good way to put it. And I mean, it's been so long since I did ketamine, and like I didn't understand any of the differences, of what a dissociative is, I mean, I bought a vial of this stuff from a dude in a gas station parking lot and cooked it in a Tupperware dish in the microwave in my dorm. So like like that's kind of where I was at. But if I could look back to that, that's what I would say is that it's definitely similar but different. But and another area I wanted to take the conversation is to get your view on coming out of this pandemic situation that we're all going through, that everyone has different levels of trauma from this. Some people are having a really hard time. Some people just are getting through it and realize they're going to have to accept the new normal when they're done, and then some people are doing great. There's all different levels, but everyone will be changed from this. This is a water or a high water mark for society's psychology going forward. Do you think that that will lead more people to find ketamine therapy or ayahuasca ceremonies or stuff like that? Do you think that this is going to be a new wave of interest in alternative therapies?
Oh, absolutely. The situational is going to be, well, so psychedelics and all that, we're having a resurgence. I mean, maybe about 5-6 years that it started to really become something that people can talk about. So it was perfect timing, which of course always seems weird, right? Yeah. And then this hits. I think because of the lead up, it's now acceptable to talk about these things. I think Oregon is already looking at legalizing some form of psilocybin, and you're going to get a massive bout of not just economic but personal depression coming, and so I think there's going to be a strong move toward opening these things up for therapeutic purposes, even if they're not fully uncontrolled, quote unquote, but that to the point that maybe doctors are allowed to use them for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, we already saw psilocybin be a breakthrough therapy, and I think it will definitely help policy, for sure. I think where I see it, I see the people that are already, psychonauts or whatever, the culture that our podcast represents, if you will. I think we serve two roles going forward, because I would like to think that we can affect policy, but much like I said, we're fighting against, economic and profit structures that, a lot of that is out of our hands, and those decisions are made in the back rooms with guys smoking cigars and like there may be not a lot that even the most successful podcast talking about psychedelics in a good light will do anything for policy. But I think the psychedelic culture serves two roles going forward. One is during this, and I'm trying to do this with, just positivity and motivation and being the change I want to see in the world, is that we can be the spiritual warriors in this moment of like, this is a tough time. It will probably get tougher, but it will not phase us, and we will grow from this, and we will spread that message. It will not be a private growth. It will be like, I'm trying to help everybody and lift everybody up. Reaching out to friends that I see on Facebook aren't doing well and being like, dude, what's up? And then having these really in-depth conversations with them that I hadn't talked to them in 10 years, and all of a sudden I'm talking about life and death and, and whatever with them. We need to be that. The psychedelic people need to be like, this is our moment to be strong and to be a beacon of hope for people that maybe just lost all hope, Yeah,
exactly. And it's, I think the Terence McKenna, I'm blanking on some of the other major players in the history of psychedelics. Their method, that's the method that I think needs to be followed to resonate with the sort of uninitiated masses. If you take the Timothy Leary tack, you're just going to scare everybody away again,
right?
And you're definitely not doing that. So.
Right. Well, and so that's the other area, is that instead of scaring people and being that us versus them, the psychedelic world needs to be a featherbed with open arms for people that have lost, faith in the government, faith in religion, faith in the economy or whatever, and are lost, are reeling. Like I think about the baby boomer generation who is about to have their entire nest egg wiped out. And they've worked their whole life to have an idea of like what the end of their life is going to look like. And now, what are they going to do? And I think there's going to be a significant percentage of them that are going to, go like, well, I did acid at Woodstock or whatever. Maybe I should get back into that. Maybe, it looks like people are doing mushrooms now. Maybe I should check that out or whatever. And the psychedelic culture needs to be like, yes, you should. And you should do it right. You should do it with intent. You should do all these things. Don't just, get the medicine, get the drugs and take them. You need to get on board with, how this is supposed to be done. And I'm really hoping, we get rid of that, like you said, Timothy Leary, us versus them. You're either on the bus or you're off the bus kind of thing, and really be like, listen, this is the new wave of psychedelia, and it's important, and it involves our spirit and our heart and our community, and really have open arms to that. And I think if those two things, if the psychedelic, if the psychonauts can be both of those things for the rest of society, policy will have no option but to change at that point.
Policy is supposed to follow society. So if you can convince society, you can convince the people, then policy should change. Now that doesn't always work that way, but at least it's easier to change policy if you got the force of the people behind you.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing you mentioned in your emails was cryptocurrency. And to bridge these two topics, there's kind of this idea that I've kind of been kicking around with different episodes of our podcast and stuff like that, of psychedelics and cryptocurrency have a weird synergy, and that they kind of started gaining in popularity at the same time. Now, a lot of this has to do with you know, people, the dark web, and having to buy psychedelics with cryptocurrency. You needed to do that. But are there any other things that, you know, using that as a jumping off point for ideas, like, are there any other like synergies between the two worlds that you've seen? Because I know you said you've been involved with cryptocurrency all, like, basically the whole time, right?
Yeah, just not kind of passively involved. I mean, I'm a massive nerd, and I had a really sweet gaming rig back in, well, right about the time Bitcoin was invented, and I heard about it, and so I started mining. And this is back when you could I mean, they hadn't even discovered GPU mining yet, so you could mine substantially with your CPU. So I did a bunch of that, and then got into Dogecoin because why not?
Yeah.
And ended up having a whole bunch. Didn't think too much of it, and unfortunately, didn't save it and bought something with it. And I would have been sitting pretty right now if I hadn't. But but realistically, I probably would have lost the key anyway. Because it was, I mean, it back then it was worth a couple of pennies or maybe a little bit more. It wasn't anything special. I thought that the model was really interesting, but yeah. So I haven't been. I've always watched it, but and then I got really annoyed that it went up so high. But now I'm back into it. I bought a whole bunch in preparation for the halvening. But as to a sort of a link between psychedelics and crypto, I haven't given it too much thought. But one thing that does stand out is that microdosing has been sort of one of the secret things of Silicon Valley, of course, and that's where crypto sort of came out of. So I would not at all be surprised if there are strong links between the two. Either in the sort of, I mean, it was the guy that invented the microprocessor. He figured it out on an LSD trip, right? I wouldn't be surprised if, say, Satoshi was sitting around, popping mushrooms and figured out how to do a distributed ledger. So those kinds of things would not shock me at all.
Yeah, I think that it all speaks to the rise of decentralization. In that, that's crypto people always talk about that, and it's something that most people don't think about, but you can see it in other areas, like with Uber and Lyft, all these decentralized transportation, Airbnb being a decentralized hospitality kind of industry, that stuff moves towards that. Cryptocurrency is a decentralized economy and networking, and a lot of other things that I don't understand the technology, but it's the goal is to be as decentralized as possible. And I look at psychedelics as the rise of decentralized thought and decentralized spirituality, in that it breaks down kind of I can't think of the word, but an institutionalized like kind of mindset that we can get in because of society. And that's another thing of why I think everyone needs to do it at least once, because even if for a second you can be like, well, maybe the government's full of shit, like even if that's all you get out of it, that's an important moment to have that question in your mind. And then as far as spirituality, it's one of the things that Terence McKenna wrote about in his book, Food of the Gods, which I recommend if you haven't read that. But his theory not theory, but his idea about kind of the evolution of human spirituality and religion is that it all started with the plant teachers. That monkeys ate mushrooms and it catalyzed human evolution, and it was the start of spirituality. And it wasn't until greed and human greed and power hungry stuff took over, and that religion and spirituality became centralized into like schools of thought and religions and all these things. But that at the core, the psychedelic experience from a plant medicine is what gave humans their spiritual side, and so like I think that's what we're seeing is like a revival in that, and to where we can say that Alibaba, which has no uh, merchandise, it can be like the largest, it's a decentralized service that's the largest commercial website in the world. I think we will get to a point where like mushrooms will be the largest religion in the world that has no leader or no central school of thought.
And I think to I got a couple of comments to that. On your sort of decentralization point, it's not just decentralization that it's providing, that all of those things you described are providing. It's disintermediation. It's the removal of the middleman.
Yeah.
And for when you look at say Uber, or you look at mushrooms, it's all removal of the middleman, and that's why they work, because they allow regular people to get into services that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get into, because you're not paying for the middleman. And you know what? The middleman hates it.
Yeah.
And so the taxi services, the people with medallions were protesting in the streets when Uber came to town often. And I think that one of the reasons why one of the sort of religious parts behind why mushrooms and psychedelics were frowned upon and then banned is because they challenged the institutional church. So, I mean, in a similar situation, you could look at what happened when the Protestants broke out of the Catholic Church, because you had a highly centralized institutional religion then being challenged by a personal God. So, I mean, I'm not religious. I've studied it, but it seems like it's all in the same kind of vein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's I can't remember if I quoted this or said this on one of our podcasts or on a podcast that I was on, but it's almost like mushrooms give you the message, or ayahuasca as well. They give you the message, to where religion sells you the message.
Yeah.
And it may not have started out that way, but it sure as fuck became that way. It's like I've seen the meme a million times of like the Pope, and it says like, here's the Pope praying for all the people in poverty in his palace of gold.
Yeah, well, and if you look at some of the histories of religion, you see the oracle at Delphi, or not. Maybe I may be getting it wrong. I might be. Oh no, the Vestal Virgins, who were extremely important in the religion of ancient Rome, Greece. I'm sorry, my memory is failing me, but I'll get to the point, which is they were kept in an area where there was a whole bunch of sulfur fumes and other things, and would go into these trances and bestow the religion on whoever asked them, and that kind of thing is, I think, what sort of coalesced into a single massive institutional religion, where they're saying, well, let us do the hard work of finding out everything, and then we'll just tell you what you need to know.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's and I'm religious for like the cultural aspect. Like I may talk a lot of shit about religion, but I do feel that it does good as well. For the community, for sure. Like I'm Jewish, and my kids go to Sunday school, and my wife and I had a Jewish wedding, and we've kept up the culture and a lot of the traditions and stuff like that. To where like the beef I'm talking about religion is like the spiritual guidance, and stuff like that. Like there is no part of me that believes that Abraham did whatever, and Moses came down with tablets, and I just don't believe any of that. I think like there's messages and there's good morals involved in scripture, but I think the people, like, I'm attracted to psychedelics for my spirituality. That gives psychedelics and that whole culture provides me with like kind of spiritual fulfillment, and I think that people that gravitate towards psychedelics for that, it's because they want to experience the message, whatever that message is. They want to experience it. And people that are gravitated towards religion to get the message. It's like they just want to be told it. They don't, like you said, they don't want to do the hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work to figure out what it's all about. I'd rather just put my money in the dish and have this guy tell me, and then I'm good and I can go do whatever I want as long as I come back here on Sunday and repent or whatever, and it's just like I've never, even though I may be very go to a lot of things with my temple and stuff like that, like at no point am I like questioning my morality around anything else because of what they're saying. It's like there's just certain things that I personally have a makeup to be like I need to experience what they're talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like we were saying about the pandemic and things changing, you said you're in the hospitality industry. How do you see that industry being disrupted by, this big change that society's going through?
Okay. Not to get too doom and gloom on everybody, but I will not be shocked if after this is over, countrywide, nationwide, we have a reduction by 30 to 40% of restaurants, like literally 30 to 40% close and don't reopen, because there's a lot of different factors at play here. But one thing people haven't yet sort of fully grasped is that the supply chain is empty. Like, people saw it a little bit. They felt the shock a little bit when this all happened and everybody ran out and grabbed toilet paper. But now toilet paper is not all that hard to find anymore because the supply chain caught up. But the institutional supply chain, the part that supplies restaurants and other things that are large food service, it's basically completely shut down or almost shut down. Previously, we would be able to order at like 6 p.m. for a 6 a.m. delivery the next day, and we could get whatever we want. Now, we place an order on Monday for Friday delivery, and on Wednesday they call us and tell us what we can and can't have. And the list that we're allowed to order from on Monday is massively, massively cut down. Like, I think my chef told me he could have ordered any amount of 500 varieties of potatoes before, and now they have 5 varieties that they list, and they may not have them all. So that's the kind of shock that's going to happen when we reopen. Completely aside from the fact that you might end up, you may or may not end up with a double dip on the virus itself. Okay, I'm ignoring that because that's going to happen or not, regardless. There's not really anything anybody can do about it. But so the supply chain is empty. The quantity and quality of food you can get is radically diminished. And when restaurants do reopen, if it's kind of soon, then they're not going to be able to get any employees, because the vast majority of restaurant workers are very low minimum wage or just above minimum wage. And right now, if they were laid off for COVID, they're making more money. So why would they come back to work until their unemployment runs out?
Yeah.
So you're going to have basically a whole bunch of pent-up cabin feverish people flooding out and trying to go to restaurants where they're woefully understaffed. So they're providing bad service. The food is not as good as they remember. And probably, even if it was as good as they remember, they're not remembering correctly because they may have upped their anticipation of how good it was because of their cabin fever. But so people are going to be all pissed off, and the industry it's going to take a decade for the industry to recover.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of optimistic scenario for me. I think that's going to happen regardless of what else happens. I think the sort of more pessimistic scenario is as these lockdowns continue, more and more people, and we're at 30 million, I think, as of yesterday in the United States. That's getting shockingly close to 20 to 25% of everyone. And I don't think a lot of those jobs are going to come back, and not all of them are hospitality. I think that large tech companies that have done layoffs, Lenovo did like 17,000 people a couple like last week I think it was.
Yep.
Those jobs may not all come back. So what maybe we thought of as the coronavirus causing a V-shaped fast recovery recession may end up being a more drawn out 1930s style depression, and that's my worry. That's where I worry, and that's why I look at crypto and say, you know what, that's where I want my money, because with all the bailouts and everything that's going on, the government is just radically inflating the currency. And yes, right now we're not going to see it. We're not going to see prices go up because nobody's buying, nobody's doing anything. But as soon as demand comes back, well, you have all this extra money, assuming it filters out of the banks, which maybe not. But that's going to cause pretty substantial inflation, and coupled with a people who are a massive bonus of unemployed people, I don't see a good outcome for a lot of people in the near term.
Yeah. Well, and obviously all of that is true, like you said, and then it's like we just ended the best week ever for the stock market.
Yeah.
And it's like and it shows when people are like, "Oh, crypto's manipulated. It's all bullshit." It's like, look at the goddamn fucking stock market that everybody's retirement is based on, in that the largest unemployment we've ever had. We have the only time in the history of our country where our country's debt is more than our GDP.
Yeah.
All of these things, and the stock market's flying up, and people are like, "Look at the recovery going on. See, the crash was or the lockdowns were priced in. We're back to business." It's like, no. It's the other shoe has to drop with the economy.
I mean, I think one of the reasons why the stock market is headed up is, well, first of all, historically, when a company did mass layoffs but didn't shut down, the stock price went up. That's what you have going on here pretty much everywhere in the economy. Everybody's doing layoffs. So, of course, the stock market's up just for that reason. But also, I mean, maybe that's where we're starting to see the inflation. Maybe that's where all that excess money is filtering. You've got large institutions like banks who have all the money, and what are they going to do? They're going to buy stock, or they're going to do something with it, and they got to do something.
Yeah, well, I was having a discussion with someone on Facebook where they were like, trying to figure out where to park their money to make it through this, and they were like, stock prices. Some older relative of theirs was like, stock prices haven't been this low in our lifetime. Like, this is when you want to buy. And it's like, and then they were like, that's why it's going up. Like, I think the original question that the guy posted that people were commenting on was like, why is the stock market going up when all this is going bad? And this person was like, well, because everyone sees the opportunity to buy low, and it's a good, you're not going to see an opportunity like this. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to believe that such a large monster like the U.S. stock market is being moved at a pace, at a pace that it hasn't gone in 50 years, is getting moved by baby boomers buying $1,000 worth of stock here and there, or is it being moved by the trillions of dollars that the Federal Reserve gave corporations to buy their own stock? And it's like it's such a short-sighted thing to be like, oh, woo, we're through it. These are good prices to buy, because it's like it's obvious that it's so inflated, like you said, and that the inflation hasn't reached the point where we're paying $20 for a gallon of milk and $50 for a pound of beef or whatever. It hasn't reached that point, so people don't realize it. But like you said, it's impacted or reflected in the stock prices that shouldn't be that dollar cost, but they are.
And I can tell you why. I mean, the things that hit most people directly and that they see, like you said, milk, eggs, gasoline. When you shut down institutional purchases, and I mean hospitality, food service, all of that, are the largest buyers of food in this country. Most people don't cook, or if they do, they don't. They're eating at least one meal out generally. So the institutions aren't buying.
Yeah.
So the price of those things is artificially depressed right now. So it won't, like, you have countervailing things. You have potentially a bunch of inflation, but then a massive reduction in demand. Of course, the price is going to be relatively stable in that case, or potentially stable. And then, of course, nobody's driving, nobody's flying. Oil is negative $30 a couple days ago, because for quirky reasons, but still, I haven't seen gasoline this cheap since I was in college, and it's. I think that when the economy comes roaring back, then that's when you're going to see all of this stuff actually
the prices go up.
filter down.
When the demand, when the demand goes back up. I did. It's and that's where, like you said about crypto, is that if you're in crypto to change your dollar value of your portfolio, right now it seems very correlated with stocks and stuff like that. But the best friend of the dollar value of cryptocurrency or any non-sovereign currency is inflation at the consumer level. And so I know the Bitcoin halving event is happening right now, and a lot of people are sending me messages. I know that the hype cycle for Bitcoin is starting back up because people that see me rant about it on Facebook or Twitter and stuff like that are starting to send me messages like, all right, how do I get a wallet, like what do I do here, and they're at the same point I was in the last time the cycle was here. And I really think that like the next year there seems to be some hope that like the halving's going to hit and the price is just going to go up, and I don't think it's going to be that. It's going to be over the course of the next year. And this time next year, I think we're going to see prices in crypto that we can't even believe, because of FOMO. But the last bubble in Bitcoin was a greed bubble. Everything was good. Everything was, all markets were doing good. Everything was on a historic bull run. The next bubble is going to be a fear bubble. And the only thing more irrational than greed is fear.
Yep.
And so I really see that situation coming for crypto. And so everyone I'm telling is like, listen, it's still an investment. Don't invest more than you can lose, because I totally could be wrong. I didn't know what the fuck, any of this shit I talk about meant 5 years ago. I didn't know what return on investment was, what ROI was. Like this. I'm relatively new to finances, but I've done as much of a deep dive research wise as anything else I've ever done in my life. Like I have a bachelor's in biology, but at this point I think I know more about like the global finance and stuff like that than biology. But I really see that situation that you're saying, and I didn't think about the demand part of it, and that the especially the food, that the prices haven't gone up because the restaurants aren't buying as much as they were.
Yeah, the final price you see is a complex balance between demand and supply. And right now, while we do have a supply shock and suppliers are having trouble, and you heard I'm sure you've seen the reports of farmers dumping their milk because they can't get it to anybody. And the reason why that hasn't affected the prices is because the institutions aren't buying. So the demand is actually much lower than the supply. So we're effectively in a situation where standard economic models that you learn in Econ 101 don't apply as obviously. I think they all apply, but they don't apply as obviously or as quickly as everybody might expect. So things are kind of in flux right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's but that's the reason, even gives me more reason to believe that crypto is going to be mind blowing from this, is that this situation, this recovery is going to require out of the box thinking, and crypto's as out of the box thinking as you can get when it comes to economics.
Well, if you look at what happens in smaller countries like I don't know, Venezuela or other countries like that, when they radically inflate their currency and their fiat goes to zero effectively, what do people do? They go get dollars, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when the dollar does that, where do you go? Right now, the only place to go really that's ready to become the next currency is some sort of crypto. And it could be Daddy Bitcoin. It could be one of the alts. But I think now that Lightning is here, I think that we're Bitcoin is probably going to remain dominant for the foreseeable future. But if the dollar starts to crumble, and there's large geopolitical forces at work to try to make that happen in general, I think you're going to see a flight to crypto, just because it ends up being the most stable. I mean, it's not stable right now, but what is it not stable versus? It's not stable versus the dollar. The dollar's not that stable. I mean, the dollar's stable versus other currencies, but we all know what's going on with it. It's inflating constantly. That's how it works.
Yeah, I definitely think that the new reserve currencies in the world will be created by some government, and I do think they're fighting for that. I think that's a big thing going on with Russia, China, and the U.S. Is like who's gonna. And have you ever watched Mr. Robot?
Yes.
I mean, like that's kind of what that the first season or two is about and everything like that. And I used to say, because they say Fed coin in there, like the U.S. is trying to start Fed coin, and I was like, I really hated Ripple at the time, or XRP, and I was like, Ripple is Fed coin, or whatever. But yeah, like I think that'll happen. And I think that's what most people will take to. But I still even think that's good for Bitcoin, because what that'll do is it takes away the biggest roadblock in crypto adoption right now. Is like, wait, okay, where do I buy this stuff? And I got to hold up my picture and have a bill. Like people that are interested in it, when you tell them how to turn their fiat into crypto, they're like, some people are like, I'm okay, sounds good, I like technical stuff. Or they're like, I really got to have this stuff. They really have FOMO and they do it. But most people that are just like casually like, maybe I should get a Bitcoin or two or something like that, they don't even understand the value. They're like, once it comes down to the KYC laws and all that, to get your money digitized in a blockchain, a lot of people are just like, fuck it, whatever. And that's why you see at the moments where everyone wants to get in, all those sites shut down. They can't handle the amount of people that are trying to, apply and submit their information. So fast forward to an end of the petrodollar as a reserve currency, and an introduction of a digital dollar, which was is taken out of like some of the Recovery CARES Act drafts in Senate. They were starting the framework to have a digital dollar built on a blockchain, that you're going to see some country pass that, and it takes that roadblock away for at least the people in that country right away. And I think it will exponentially increase the amount of people that are holding crypto.
Yeah, and I think that if there is a country that does it first, and if it's a country that has, say Ireland or something like that does it first, or a country with similarly relaxed tax laws, you're going to see corporations just like jumping.
Right. It'll be the new Swiss bank account or overseas banks kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally see all that happening. To go back to what you're saying about food, though, and afterwards, I'm going to send you a link to one of the videos I made. I don't know if you watched it or not, about the situation we see with food.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes beyond food. Like every situation you look at in society, like coming out of this recovery, everybody has a choice. You can't go back to normal. That just isn't going to happen. That's obvious. But everyone has a choice to go back to worse or go back to better,
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a real big opportunity. And one of the big things that I've been trying to do, first off, even if we're wrong with our doom and gloom, this has been a test run for some real serious shit, some real end of the world stuff. And I realized, like, I got to have way more non-perishable food on hand, like that's like everybody needs to like realize that's important. That's not just a crazy prepper thing. Like you got to be able to get clean water and food without, the grid or without stores being open, and so that's been a big thing that I hope everyone takes out of this and going forward is more prepared to feed themselves. And also I hope to see an increase in gardening because of that. And just less reliance on on society's food, even if that hurts the hospitality industry. Like I'm not even worried about the money of it. It's just more the like self sustainable, not so much of a panic if stuff's going down kind of situation. So I'm definitely increasing that in myself. I already had a garden, but I'm definitely taking it more serious this year. But the other thing that I'm doing, which has always been something I've moved towards, one of my really good friends who's been a guest on this podcast, already had been living his life this way of like, he doesn't eat meat unless it's from a local, grass-fed farm. Like he does not support the factory meat industry at all. And not that we can like society cannot abandon that. Like there will always be factory farms until there's no more cows, until we make cows extinct, basically. But if people can take control and not be so like tied to that system and the price gouging that will happen and everything like that, the more people can support local farms, local meat producers, local slaughtering, butchers, just keeping their meat consumption as close to home as possible, and as humane as possible, you will see an increase. Again, it's going to be, an area for corporate farmers that had, lose their land or lose their ability to, carry the strains of whatever crops they grow or whatever. It will let them become a local farmer again. And we can have thriving farmers markets and storefronts again. Like I work in the country a lot, and you don't know how many abandoned farmers storefronts there are where they had their farm, their barn, their silos, and their storefront where they sold all their stuff. All of those things do not exist anymore. And they are rotting away in front of an old farmhouse that nobody even farms anymore because the farmer died and his kids went to college and became a lawyer, and they rent out the house now. And like all of rural America is littered with the remnants of what used to be a local supply chain.
Yep.
And so to go back to what I was saying, if we want to create a situation where we go back to better, we need to go back to that. And I think that helps the hospitality industry as well, because if that, people are going to be willing to support restaurants, smaller restaurants that are farm to table and stuff like that. And I think you could see a rise in that. You're going to see TGI Fridays closing in droves around the country, but I think you're going to see an increase, hopefully, and it will probably be regional and whatever. But I think you'll see an increase in farm to table hospitality.
And we've already started to see that in the industry as even a couple of years ago, and maybe even I could say 5 or 6 years ago. Our operation does as much as we really can. We don't bill ourselves as a farm to table place, but we do as much as we can that way because, just for the sake that the quality is better, right?
Yeah.
If I call U.S. Foods, which is one of the large food purveyors, and they give me crap lettuce, all I can do is complain to my sales guy. But if Farmer Joe down the street gives me crap lettuce, I'm like, dude, your lettuce sucked. What's up? And they can fix it. So it's I think that farm to table is going to become a lot more important to a lot more people. Right now or before COVID, it was kind of a upper middle class, upper class kind of thing. And I think now it's just going to be what everybody thinks is right eventually. It'll take a while to get there, right? But
right. Well, and I'm not talking about it will take a while for society. I think I'm talking more on the individual level, like how people can alleviate the cost crunch that they're going to feel and the low quality, like you said, that is also, even if the prices don't get affected or they can pull some sort of wizardry to keep us from, having inflation on the consumer level, the quality and the service is going to be shit. And it's like, I was talking with a friend of mine who he's from Iraq, and he moved here and started this, like a Mediterranean restaurant, and I think he was like 25, and we started going to his restaurant about 6 or 7 years ago when my son was in soccer, and since then he's just built it up to the point where a really big grocery store in our area that, people drive from all over to go to. They wanted to open a Mediterranean stand, and they came to him and were like, "Hey, would you do this?" And so he's got 2 locations now, and his brother came over, and so his brother runs the first restaurant he had, and then he runs the stand. And I was talking with him about it, and I was like, man, I've been trying to go over there for lunch every day just to support him, and he was like, you've been one of my first customers, and like, I really appreciate you guys, at this time and coming in. And I was like, man, I would hate to see you go under. Like, you have one of the best Mediterranean restaurants I've ever been to, and he's like, oh, we'll be fine. He's like, I really, I had to lay everyone off, and, business is down because, people are coming to the grocery store to shop, not to, not to go get a sandwich, but he's like, we'll make it through. But he was like, we were talking about other restaurants that I saw that were closing, and he's like, you gotta, this is a time where it's going to be, a trim the fat almost, where like, if you were operating barely, getting by, barely making a profit, like you can't make it now, like you had like proper business sense and be the accountant side of owning a restaurant, like now is more important than ever. But he said also it's like, he's been donating meals and like deliver, he's like, we've been embracing our community, and they've been giving that love right back, and so like, I think restaurants can make it through that, by being like, we're a part of the community, like we're in this with you guys, we're not just here to make a buck off of you. And so I really hope that's kind of how restaurant owners can get through this as well,
And I think those that are creative and smart enough can do that. But like you said, it's already a razor thin margin business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons why the employees are paid so low is because you can't raise their wages. If you did, well, yay, your competitor down the street isn't, and so you're going to be charging $5 more a sandwich.
Yeah.
And sure, you'll be able to attract a certain clientele with that, but will that be enough to allow you to make your mortgage payment or your rent or your electricity or all of that? And one thing I do hope that this does, and I say this as the employer, I hope this allows us to readjust how those my line level people are paid. If I can give them another $3, $4, $5 an hour. But I just don't know how this is going to play out with that respect. So
yeah. I mean, it is a damn shame, like one of the best restaurants in Cincinnati, and this is another thing. Maybe you can speak to this. I live in Cincinnati, and one of the best restaurants I went there this summer, and I would have never looked it up because it was kind of a hipster place, and so Cincinnati, like the downtown was like garbage years ago, and they totally gentrified the fuck out of it. And like one fucking mega conglomerate, property management company bought all these, condemned buildings, knocked them down, built these, high rent condos with this, craft breweries and just name a hipster like thing, and like it's there, all these fancy restaurants, all this stuff, and it's all super high rent for like buildings that bums used to overdose in. And like so anyway, this restaurant was doing killer business.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a charcuterie, like you could buy like artisan quality meats and stuff like that, but they also made all these awesome sandwiches, and they made their own wine, and it's just this whole like kind of artisan craft thing that every time I didn't go there till the summer, but then I was like hooked on their sandwiches. And they were packed, line out the door. And I would imagine that even as there was a lot of takeout business.
Mm-hmm.
But they went out. This killed them. Mm-hmm. And so, do you think that was, I was thinking it was because their rent, their lease, whatever, was so high that it's like there was no room for profit in a sandwich shop. But do you think it's more the supply chain that made them go under?
No, I think it's the margin. I think the if you don't have a landlord that's going to deal, and some landlords do, and but if you don't have a landlord that's going to deal and give you a break on the rent, and even that's the other problem is if you get a break on the rent, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't have to pay, or does that mean that you do have to pay, just not right now? Because
Yeah,
if it's the second one, then with such slim margins, a restaurant may not be able to actually ever catch up. If you have
yeah,
like you put enough debt on that thing, and you're screwed.
yeah,
Uh, and the the amount of leverage you have, and coupled with the tiny margins, means you have almost no room for error, and this is a big problem. So I think that's probably what did it. That and whatever health department or governor shutdowns you had, maybe they just said, you know what, it's time to throw in the towel, because if even if we can survive this, we'll survive it in such horrible shape that it won't be worth it. And I think I think that's the calculation that a lot of restaurant owners are going to make. Independent restaurant owners like myself are going to make, where you look at it and say, you know what, at the moment, the best thing for me to do after this is gone is shut it all down, wait a little while, see what happens, and then open up something new somewhere else.
yeah,
And so I think that at least that's probably how I'm going to have to play it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So in Ohio, they didn't have to close. It's just they couldn't have any dine in.
Yeah.
It's all
And that's
carry out and delivery.
that's we're in an odd situation because our restaurant is attached to a hotel, and we've basically, except for room service, we've never really done quote takeout. But we actually pivoted and switched to a full takeout model, and have been doing. We've been doing enough business to keep the people we have still have employed, and
Yeah,
we did about so on Easter. We usually would have a huge buffet brunch thing where we'd get hundreds of people in, and we'd take home. Well, not take home. We'd gross so many tens of thousands of dollars. This Easter, we decided to do the best we could, and we offered pre-order takeout packaged buffet meals. We did 50% of the business in dollars that we did with full service, with 1/10 the staff. So we actually did better because of that. And so it's odd how that worked out for us. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be, but it was just, we were shocked at that point. But anybody who's able to pivot like that should be able to survive. I've got other problems that are going on, but because we were actually in the middle of a bankruptcy when this all happened, for unrelated reasons, and that's helped to that's what sort of brought on the ketamine earlier. But the and of course we because of the bankruptcy, we're not able to get the PPP bailout funds.
yeah,
So that's what's going to kill us. I think that if that weren't the case, if we could have gotten those bailout funds, we would have been able to stumble through it because of the unique situation we're in with how everything's set up.
yeah,
But a lot of restaurants, I mean, I have friends in the restaurant industry that they didn't bother, they didn't think about it, they didn't go, or they didn't get it in time and didn't get the PPP funds, so they're in the same boat as us, but they really shouldn't have been.
yeah, yeah. What about in Illinois, Stan? Like, what do you think the carnage is going to be restaurant wise? Like, because I think you guys were totally closed, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, they shut down at the beginning of it all, early March. They shut down everything, and then they kind of reopened to take out and carry out. Um, but the problem with it here is I don't see the huge attraction to support local that you're talking about. Like, I hope that that's the case, but I think here all the bigger restaurants are going to be the ones that just keep going. And even on like Uber Eats or those type of companies, I've seen that the delivery assistance that they provide is still an economic downside for these local companies. Like they're taking such a big cut out of it that the small guy restaurants and the local restaurants still are operating on such small margins that it's just like, is it even worth having Uber Eats deliver the food at this point?
Yeah.
So I mean, the best thing that I've heard for people to do is just like call them directly. A lot of the times if they didn't have delivery, they have delivery now, or and like locally like in-house delivery, or carry out, and just call them directly instead of going through an app, because there's so much there's such a cut taking out of it, or like
Yeah.
service fees, that it's just almost not even worth it for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those apps cut on both sides. I mean,
Yeah.
as a consumer, you're paying a delivery fee and a service fee, and on the restaurant side, you're paying a service fee too. So to get the convenience, everybody's paying more, and that's basically how they work. So if you see something in a restaurant that's either close enough that you can pop over and just take it as takeout, just give them a call directly.
Mhm.
They'll appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm worried about like I know there's the cabin fever, like the pent up demand that's coming, but there's still like the anxiety that this virus has caused. That's like people are gonna probably hoard their money for a little bit. Like I think that, so maybe there's 75% of the initial 100 that was gonna go out and spend their money, but still that 25% is gonna be like, I don't know, there might be a second wave of this, and I'm not expecting another check coming from the government, so I'm gonna hold on to this. So like even that's gonna hurt businesses across the board as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So, well, on both things that you said there, Stan, like, I guess my perspective is different because I'm not in the city, as
Mhm.
far as like in the country, I live on the verge of country and suburbs, and like, as far as the farm to table aspect, like, or the delivery, like we don't, most of the restaurants here don't even have Uber Eats. Like they're just starting to, allow it or
Yeah.
whatever. And it is that like everyone wants to support the community, and like, people are driving by and honking, holding up signs like, we support whatever restaurant, and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And so like I could see that in a city, in an urban environment, that is not going to be a resolution to the problem. Um, but oh crap, what was the last point you were making there about Illinois?
Oh, just that the people that are going to be coming out and saving their money.
Oh, right. I- so I think that relies on the fear staying constant, and I guess, and maybe I'm too much of an optimist, and there will be scared people for sure. There's going to be people wearing masks for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that fear is propagated by the government and the government's response to all this, and the government, flexing of their muscle and being able, like, we think you should be afraid of all of this. And we feel so strongly about that. We're going to make you stay in your house because we can. That, numbers wise, and maybe it comes down to misinformation, and you can find something to back up everything you believe, but it does seem like everything was an overreaction. Not saying that overreactions are bad. I would rather they overreact than underreact. But I think in the next month is going to be very telling, especially as we see what happens in Atlanta, or Georgia, because they
Mhm.
just opened everything up, go back to school and everything. I think the fear is going to go away. I think this was a test run for something that should be fear that lasts for years and years. But I think for the most part, the fear of the virus by a majority of the population is going to go to the same place the immigrant caravan went, and ISIS went, and all the other things that the government and the media can really ramp us up to be afraid of. I really think people are going to be like, you know, whether it's because of an antiviral drug or just, the numbers not supporting the fear. Um, I do think in a year's time, people will be more worried about, um, maybe the job loss and the changing of the industries than the virus and going out and spending money. Like I think people are gonna spend money like gangbusters this summer at least,
Mhm.
Like I think like everyone's gonna be unafraid and they're gonna go out and whatever. So and everyone's gonna have a lot more money because they don't have any concert tickets to buy or football tickets to buy or whatever ends up happening there.
And I think that to sort of jump off of that, I think that I mean, in order to get the response that the government needed, they needed to scare the shit out of everybody. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah.
So once everything is starting to come back together and look like we've got this thing licked, the government's going to do everything they can to make everybody not afraid.
Right.
Like they're gonna come. You're gonna have people out there saying, "Okay, we're totally past it. Everybody's safe." Blah blah blah. Just to make sure that because they at that point the government's going to be more scared of the economy than anything else. So,
exactly. And
Yeah, that's true.
And the economy is going to blindside people. Like what I was saying there, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be afraid to spend money.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that people won't be afraid to spend money. Like
and
most people.
And
like because the stock
just
market's
come
going to. Yeah, the stock market's going to keep going up, and that's what people are going to be arguing about. Is like, there's going to be people like me, like, hey, the fucking sky's about to fall, and people are like, you've been saying that forever, and like people are going to be like, we're through it. This is the recovery. The crash in March was everything was priced in then. This is your opportunity to buy a new bull market and whatever. And they're especially going to keep that up because it's an election year. Like how would all of this be handled by the media and the government if there wasn't a goddamn election this year,
Yeah, and it could turn out that everything ends up okay. But I really do think that if there is a big spike in the stock market that continues, I mean it's going right now, but if it continues, it may turn out to just have been a bull trap. So
yeah, I know. So yeah, man. But like I said, I guess that, we should wrap it up. I think you said you got to get going and I got to get going too. But, just to bring back the point I said about that, whatever happens, we can't go back to normal. That's obvious.
Yeah.
And I think every single person can choose for themselves, their family, their community to go back to normal or to go back to worse or to go back to better. And I just hope as many people as they can, choose the latter there,
Okay.
But, yeah, man. So, thanks for coming on. I love your story with ketamine and I love talking to you about all the other stuff. This is a great talk and I'm really happy to have you on the Discord server and, I look forward to discussions on there and anytime you got anything else you want to talk about, hit me up, man. And you can come back on the cast too.
All right. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for having me.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.